A common thread that I've noticed throughout my sewing journey is how often sewing has marked a moment in time, helping me process, reflect, and carry memories through different seasons of life. A couple of years ago, our family was walking through a really difficult time, and in those heavy days, I started a quilt. Putting my hands to that work helped me process a lot of grief, and even now, every time I see that quilt draped over the armrest on our couch, I'm reminded of how creating something slow and beautiful can bring comfort when words fall short. Earlier this year, a dear friend of mine was going through a hard season of her own. I kept thinking about her and felt that little nudge to make something for her. And a quilt felt like the right thing to do, something that's comforting, that lasts a long time, and just be stitched with love. I casually asked her what colors she likes in her home, and she said neutrals. So I ran with it. I started planning a quilt I hoped would bring a bright spot during a hard time. In this video, I'll show you the process of making this Sawtooth Star quilt, including how to sew flying geese using a method that minimizes fabric waste and makes the process flow smoothly. One part of the process that felt both exciting and a little intimidating was fabric shopping. I visited a local quilt shop with rows and rows of fabrics. To keep things cohesive, I limited myself to one section of the store, and this really helped narrow down my color palette and made everything work together. I chose pre-cut fat quarters, which made the selection easy. From each fat quarter, I could get up to 2 12-inch star blocks. For the background fabric, I picked a soft neutral that gave the eye a place to rest and they let the other fabrics really stand out. So I'm putting together these quilt blocks, and this is the second time I've sewn a quilt with the sawtooth pattern, but the first time I did it, it was the more cumbersome way. It was very inefficient, wasting fabric and time. This time I turned to Craftsy to learn some tips and tricks about quilting, and Craftsy is actually sponsoring today's video. So I turned to Craftsy to sew what they call flying geese, and this is a technique in quilting. And I've never even heard about it until recently when I was looking on Craftsy for some inspiration and knowledge about sewing and quilting. So I came across this tutorial all about sewing flying geese, and I cannot tell you how much better this quilt looks than my previous one just because of this technique and the things that I picked up from Craftsy. Craftsy is an online community full of makers and teachers who have online courses and classes that are going to take you through new skills and hobbies, whether it's new to you or maybe you just need to brush up on some of your skills. They have everything from sewing to quilting, baking, painting, journaling. There's so much on there that you can learn. Classes are so approachable and they get right into the lesson where you can learn quickly what you are learning. So when I needed to learn this flying geese technique, I felt like I was given the instructions in such a clear way that I had been doing this for years, when in reality, I just watched one class on Craftsy. If you have been wanting to get into quilting or sewing or any new hobby, then Craftsy is a great place to start. The first 1,000 people to sign up with the link in my description will get the premium subscription to Craftsy for the first year for $1.49. Craftsy is constantly adding new classes, so sign up today using the link in my description. And thank you, Craftsy, for sponsoring this video. So to make the flying geese, I'm going to put all the measurements here on the screen for you to make it easy that you can screenshot. But you're essentially going to cut a bunch of squares, and then those squares are going to make the flying geese. This really helps make sure that when you're sewing, you're not having to cut intricate triangles or get everything lined up easily. I found that it was forgiving and it just turned out so easy. Now that you have everything cut out into squares, you're going to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of each smaller square. Place the two small squares right sides together on the opposite corners of the large square. The drawn lines will make this straight line across, and this will be your guide. So sew 1/4 of an inch from both sides of the marked line. Cut along the line, and this will give you 2 pieces. Take your iron and iron them where it makes more of a heart shape. Then you're going to take a 1/3 small square on the remaining corner of each unit, right sides together. So 1/4 of an inch from both sides of the drawn line. Now cut this again in between that stitch line, and this will be ironed open, and you'll have 4 flying geese. Isn't that crazy how it works out like that? I loved how just learning this process unlocked so many things for me in my mind. When I look at a quilt, it's not just all of these intricate pieces woven together. It's someone taking a problem and finding a really helpful solution to make it streamlined and turn into that meditative process. So I wanted my star quilt to be about 50 by 60 inches. And so I figured this would need 20 star blocks. So you could do this with 10 blocks and then 10 just regular squares, but I chose to do all stars. Once you get into a rhythm, it becomes meditative, cutting, sewing, and pressing. I made a few blocks one at a time to get the hang of it. Then once I felt confident, I started to batch each step, which really sped things up. I played around with the layout, alternating blocks where the pattern fabric is in the center and others where it's in the background and the neutral is in the center. I like that balance that it brings to the overall design of the quilt. So once the quilt blocks were finished, I pressed them really well and laid them out to find a pleasing arrangement. Then I pieced them together row by row to create the quilt top. Seeing the full design come together is always so satisfying. It's like watching an idea from your head turn into something tangible. So next came to basting the layers. I used a spray baste and I doubled up the batting to give it that really cushiony, cozy feeling, you know, when you just have this quilt that you've had for years and it just feels so nice to wrap up in. That's how I wanted it to feel. For the backing, I chose one of the pattern fabrics that tied all of the colors together. When it came to time to quilt, I debated taking it to my local shop for long arm quilting. They have this process where they will do all of the top stitching for you in the design that you choose, which is a wonderful option if you want that professional finish and something that I will definitely do later on. I've also done hand quilting before and I love how personal that feels. But this time I decided to machine quilt it myself at home and stitching in the ditch to outline the stars and squares. Even though this is a larger quilt than I've made in the past, this is more of a lap size quilt, so it still felt doable to do on my machine at home. So of course there were a few hiccups, like breaking a needle mid-project. Needle just broke pretty significantly. Usually when my needle breaks, it's like not a huge deal, but this one's like stuck. So, you know, sometimes you're like just in your own little world sewing and then your needle breaks and you have to stop. The walking foot was working really well. So I'm pretty confused as to why it just broke out of normal because this is a new needle. But also, I don't know. Now I'm just trying to get the needle out. Usually when stuff like this happens, I think it's just a sign that it's a good time to stop for the day. Revisit it tomorrow. I am going to just try to get this needle out of the machine because I don't want to keep it in there. This would be a moment that is frustrating. And it can be one of those things that just stops you from picking up a project again. And I just want to let you know that it happens to everybody. You know, I'm going to finish the quilt and it's going to be beautiful. It's going to take some time. I don't know how I'm going to get this needle out. Sometimes this is just part of the process. Okay, so I took off the presser foot. Oh, I didn't mess up too terribly, so I'm really glad that the needle didn't break. I just don't know why it happened to stop like that and get stuck. I'm gonna, just for safety precautions, do a new needle. I don't want to put the same needle back into the... I will pick this up again tomorrow, but I am going to set it up, rewind my bobbin, and keep going. You know, when it's a good time to. So it's just kind of part of it. Once it works now. But I highly recommend using a walking foot. It was a game changer for the quilting step and it helps feed the layers evenly. It makes a huge difference in the finish. Tape. So this is a quilt. What do you think? Good? Good.
Both hands up.
Both hands up. So we're going to make the bias tape out of this and it's going to go around the edges. The last step was making and attaching the binding. I used the magic square method to create continuous bias tape and stitch it all the way around. Okay, watch.
you teaming?
This is going to make a straight line. Boop. Boop.
Don't cut yourself again.
I'm almost ready to pass this quilt along to my friend. I just need to finish that bias step. But what a gift it is to make something by hand for someone you love.
Bias day was so long. Can't believe it.
So much. Look at that. Another thing I love about these projects is they're all so different. So every small decision, from how you're going to quilt something, to the fabric you choose, to the design, it all works together to create its own story. And I think that when I've hit a roadblock and I don't know what I want to do, whether it's long arm quilt or hand quilt or quilt on my machine at home, I usually just take a break. I sleep on it. I talk it out with a friend or my husband, even someone that doesn't necessarily know how to sew. I find that talking it out brings clarity to what I'm feeling and what would be the best for this project. So maybe next time, if you're feeling a little stuck in a project, just take a step back, take a break. There's no rush, and you will enjoy the end product so much better when you've taken your time and thought it through. I would love to see your projects. You can tag me on Instagram. And if you want to learn quilting by hand, then click this next video.